Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm here in my brand new, it says Team Alphaba. I saw somebody comment under one of the million videos about the song Defying Gravity that Wicked had become the commenter's whole personality trait. I feel like I'm transforming into that commenter. Anyway, so it's my new hoodie, and I love it. Okay. Welcome. Welcome to the people in chat, and welcome to the people watching on replay. It's good to see you, and I appreciate you. Okay. Here we go. Hi, Taliu. How are you? Okay, so yesterday I was sitting on the couch, minding my own beeswax, and an absolutely amazing... Oh, you should never go into that dump again. I'm not even going to ask, Taliu. It's okay. Hello, Cups by Julie. Good to see you. Oh, I did want to say something. I don't know which chat you were lurking in, although I can take a guess. Hi, Rosie. So I was listening to Lol Cow Live, the one where Boogie, Keem, and Jordy were all arguing. Hey, Donna. Good to see you, and thanks for the promotion. By the way, I saw that tweet. I appreciate you. I was watching that stream where they all squabbled with one another, where Boogie had apparently shaved all the hair off his face and is looking very different. And, Boogie was mad at Wings and calling him lazy and all that. Now, the only reason I watch that show at all when I do, which is seldom now, is because I'm a big fan of Wings. I think Wings is hilarious. Laziness, fatness, and all. I get a kick out of the guy. He couldn't give a fuck. And I appreciate that. And he doesn't whine as much as Boogie. He used to, but he doesn't anymore. Now, it appears that Boogie's new tactic for climbing on the cross is that apparently, this is what I guess I could glean from that crazy stream. So if anybody knows any details, let me know in chat. Are they building a studio in South Carolina? Is that why Boogie is making such a big stink about how he's going to be taking Desi 1,000 miles away from her sick father? And it's like a whole soap opera going on over there that Boogie is going to be relocating from Arkansas to South Carolina. Why are they building a studio in South Carolina? Is that to accommodate Wings? But why, though? Why are they building a studio where I guess all three of them can broadcast from? So that means that Keem is moving to South Carolina too. What is going on? I don't understand. I mean, for Keem, I can get it because he's got a ton of money, and I think that South Carolina's tax rates are probably much lower than whatever state he's currently living in. But what is the point, though? What is the point? I mean, it's giving Boogie a perfect excuse to, whine and cry about how we're doing all this for you, Jordy. Why are they accommodating Jordy, though? Why does Wings need this? I don't get it. So again, if anyone can let me know, a studio could just, I don't understand. Why would you go to all that trouble and expense? I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. South Carolina is great. And I don't know where in South Carolina they're planning on doing this. Is this going to be out in the boondocks, out by where Wings lives? And I saw that as an added bonus, Keemstar is going to be paying Boogie's rent. So it's not like he's going to have to pay a mortgage and he's going to have to pay rent in South Carolina. So he's basically getting a huge living expense taken care of by Keemstar. I'm just not understanding why you would move from 3 remote locations to one central one. It seems to me to be a recipe for disaster. Yeah, I mean, why not? Why not? And South Carolina's great. I mean, like I said, I don't know where in South Carolina they're building this studio, but if I could be closer to Charleston, I would do it in a second. And there are other cool places in South Carolina. I love South Carolina. And I was hoping that that meant that Boogie was going to sell that house, which is a huge millstone around his neck. It's his biggest living expense. He's constantly belly aching about how he doesn't know how he's going to make it, to pay the mortgage every month. And it's like a whole, whatever. Just sell the goddamn house, Boogie. How about that? Sell the fucking house. Move to South Carolina. Get your rent paid. You'll have all this extra money. And then you'll be able to afford to fly Desi back if she needs to take care of her father. Whatever. It's all bullshit. And then there was a point where apparently Boogie made it sound like all the shows are scripted, which really pissed Keem off, although it wouldn't surprise me because I find it really, really hard to believe that all the anger that you see on that show is authentic. I can't believe it. They're making so much money. They're doing well, and I know that when they squabble and bicker with one another, it does better. But it seems like they're having trouble kind of dragging Wings into that dynamic because Wings just doesn't rage like that anymore. Certainly not on that channel. All right, so anyway, back to the main thing. I mean, listen, I would much rather watch those three quarrel with one another than watch a bunch of fat cows going on that show or on the Queen show and creating fake drama. I don't give a fuck about Tina. That Grace girl is weird. I guess she's been fired. I don't know who Becky is. And I don't care. I just don't want to get invested in that crew of characters. I find them all disgusting. Yeah, I don't know. It's very manufactured. It is. It's very manufactured. Do I believe that Wings and Boogie are lazy? 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. I think that anybody who would fight to get a spot on a show with lolcow in the title tells you everything you need to know. And I guess that Frenchie is very angry that Daddy Keem hasn't been able to get YouTube to reverse the strike on her channel. How many times do people have to tell these idiots that Keemstar cares about money? He wants views and he wants money. Hey, Tizzy, how you doing? That's it. He doesn't give a crap about your personal problems unless he can exploit them to get views and make money on his channel. He's not going to get overly invested in your content if he doesn't know you. Like one time he intervened for Ethan Ralph for the kill stream because he watched the kill stream. He doesn't watch those other channels. Why would he care? If Frenchie's channel goes down, if anybody's channel goes down, it doesn't matter to him. And come on, big tough bitch, Frenchie, fight your own battles, Maybe you can dox everybody at YouTube and you'll persuade them that way in your own inimitable style. Okay, back to today's main event. So anyway, this stream popped up in my recommended. Hello, Crochetter. Hello, my love. And I was tickled by it. I was absolutely tickled by it because this individual who hosts this channel is a real character. So let me pull this up. I'd never heard of this person before, but this person is called Riverboat Jack. Okay, Riverboat Jack is very, very upset with the Young Turks. Riverboat Jack is a tanky, a self-admitted socialist, communist, whatever. The kind of person who believes that the executive of an insurance company deserves to get gunned down in cold blood in the streets of New York by an assassin. And this is a question I have for the people who are lionizing Luigi Mangione. You do realize that Luigi Mangione comes from a very wealthy family, right? He's not some poor street urchin who is the working man's hero. He has a double Ivy from Penn. And his family is extremely wealthy. And this is the guy that you want to prop up because you think that killing somebody because they have a job working for an industry that you don't like, that nobody likes really, but that is basically open season to open fire on them and kill them. Okay. It's a point of view. All right. Oh, it is? Well, there you go. Yeah, he is from Maryland. That's right. He is from Maryland. Let me put it this way. The Mangione story, family story, is not exactly Les Miserables. Okay? Luigi Mangione is no Jean Valjean. All right? Let's just cut it out. Yeah, exactly. This seems to be the big talking point. He's a dreamboat. So what if he's a killer? Well, so is Ted Bundy. There have been handsome serial killers in the past, or handsome murderers in the past. You know, we saw the same cringy swooning over Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the surviving brother of the brother pair that masterminded and executed the Boston Marathon bombing. I haven't seen Dzhokhar Tsarnaev in quite some time. I don't know what he looks like now, but you know, he had the girlies swooning at the time. It's disgusting. All right, so let's listen to what Riverboat Jack had to say, because Riverboat Jack is very, very upset at TYT. Let's go.
Now, folks, I've given this a lot of thought.
Uh-oh.
Because, frankly...
And yes, for those of you who are wondering, by all means, it's ma'am, okay? And the sad thing is that before this Riverboat Jack person decided to take on this, whatever this is, he was a really handsome man, good-looking man. You know, if you look at the before and after, yeah. All right, let's continue.
I don't want to make this seem like it's a personal grievance.
Oh, no, okay? God forbid. Yeah.
I think we have to start doing more videos about TYT.
Let's do it. I'm all for it.
Largely because they're just increasingly conservative.
Oh.
In a way that I find disturbing.
Oh, no.
To see. And in a way that I believe requires pushback.
Okay, do it. By all means.
So, one of the things I saw today, which is frankly...
Polling shows that American...
Spoilers.
Interesting. Okay, I never heard of the White Leaf Network. I don't know who Demon Mama is, but I know who Vosh is, of course. And Vosh is a nightmare. So this person is, I'm guessing that the White Leaf Network is part of BreadTube, which is BreadTube. But okay, let's go.
One of the things I saw today, which frankly drove me crazy.
Oh no.
Was from actually from 2 days ago, but you know what? I'm a bit disgusted, frankly.
Oh, thanks, Donna. I appreciate that.
You've got
Thank
Dave
you.
Rubin here.
Oh no.
Having seen Anna Kasparian go on Piers Morgan, say, "Hey, Anna Kasparian, glad to see you're rethinking some things. For the record, I can explain my classically liberal beliefs quite well. I wrote 2 books about them.
Whatever,
and I never
Dave.
lied about TYT. Some people lied to you. That's not what's important. Want
Hey,
to break
Oxen.
the internet?
And? What?
Like the grift is almost complete, chat.
What grift?
The grift is almost complete.
Not more grifting. Oh no.
And I don't think it's unfair to talk about their positions now.
No,
Okay?
absolutely
and
not.
I'm not
Go
gonna
ahead.
Make this like a the drama, whatever. We've already done that. What I care about is like their reporting now. On a purely
now you
professional
care
level,
about it.
right?
Okay.
We did that long series of videos about how they were spreading misinformation about like Venezuelan gangs in Colorado.
What misinformation about Venezuelan gangs in Colorado? It's been confirmed by the Aurora mayor. What misinformation? Now, I get it that this video or this stream was done before the Aurora mayor came out and admitted that there's a really serious problem. Because, they had been blaming all that mess at those apartment complexes on the landlord, who sounds like a real piece of shit, by the way. All right, so, but the landlord aside, the landlord did not give these Venezuelans the firepower that they used to go door to door to terrorize people living in the building. So no, if anything, they probably understated it because, again, they were speaking out before the mayor of Aurora made his statement. But let's continue. And
essentially, they fabricated that story and like never issued any corrections. Or at the very least, they uncritically re-reported that story and never issued any corrections. I shouldn't say
what corrections?
It. That was a misspeak. And I know that because I covered it.
Good question.
Like I was paying attention to that story and nothing they said about it was correct.
All right.
And then Jose came and made that even bigger video about it. And Jose did a much better job than I did. But you know what?
I don't know who
I was
Jose
there
is.
first.
All right. Let's speed her up.
All that to say, there's another video that I want to go over that I'm just irritated about. On a deep
Let's
level.
do it.
And I think that this actually segues into the next segment that I have planned. So we're gonna go over this.
Okay.
We're gonna go over this.
We'll get to it then.
All right. So this is a video from 5 days ago, right? And it's titled, "Are Trans Activists Reevaluating Their Strategy?"
They're not, but okay.
And there are so many problems with this video, with the people that information is being drawn from, and I just need to really start pointing it out.
It depends on how you define that. Okay. I am not anti-trans. I'm not. What I am anti is there. If you watched the stream with Dr. Oz Hakim, you'll know that trans is being used as an umbrella term to define separate groups of people and lump them all together under one definition, one category, and they really aren't the same. There's the transgender folk, like Blair White and Buck Angel and Lorraine Cox and people like that. Then there are the cross-dressers, and when I say cross-dressers, I am not talking about the guys who go on RuPaul's Drag Race to compete. I'm not talking about drag queens. I'm talking about generally straight men who like to dress like women for a number of different reasons. Whether it's for a sexual turn-on, whether it's because they are trying to take on the identity of a woman in their life. But usually with a lot of these men, well, there are a lot of reasons why men cross-dress. They get a thrill out of it. They enjoy it. It's a kink. It's whatever. And then there are the AGP, the autogynephiles. And those three categories of people who are not the same are all lumped under the same, are all defined the same way, but they're not the same. So my problem is with the people who advocate for the drugging and mutilation of children. I have a huge problem with that. And that's not an exclusively trans issue. All right, because there are a lot of heterosexual people who are involved in this industry. My problem is with men who get sexually turned on wearing women's clothes or deluding themselves into thinking that they're women or claiming that they're women with absolutely no effort to transition. They don't have gender dysphoria. They haven't been diagnosed with anything. And they are forcing their way into women's spaces, and women are obliged to accept that as a fact of life. Or they're getting onto women's sports teams, and women are supposed to take it on the chin and accept that as something that's fine, because we have been told over and over and over again that trans women are women. They are not. They are men. They are men, either who have transformed themselves surgically or chemically in order to pass as the sex that they identify with. Or they just stand up and say, I am a woman, and we all have to take that at face value. I do not. So that is my position. Do I hate trans people? Transgender people, like legitimately transgender people? Absolutely not. Because usually it's not the actual legitimate transgender people who are making problems. And the actual transgender people that I admire are people like Buck Angel and Blair White and the lovely person who left a comment under one of my streams not so long ago, who is transgender and just wants to be left the fuck alone and doesn't agree with all this madness. Those are the people that I support. Those are the kinds of transgender people that I used to associate with years and years and years ago, back in the 80s and 90s. Back when it was called, instead of gender affirming care, it was called getting a sex change operation. But this new crop of people, no, I do not support this new crop of people. And I don't like the fact that all those disparate groups have been lumped together as if they are all the same, which they are not.
Because it's kind of too egregious for me to just kind of be like, well, they're just one of the biggest news networks online. You know, I'm nothing compared to their channel. I'm a nobody, right? But I feel like a kind of professional obligation to push back on this. So, without further ado, here we go.
Okay.
Polling shows that Americans actually seem to be growing less empathetic to the transgender cause. But what's behind it? What's going on here? Well, some activists and movement leaders think that it is due to the transgender movement's confrontational and accusatory approach. And I'm not saying that. This lengthy piece published in the New York Times this week really did delve into it.
Now, before we go on here, you're not saying that, but you are making the choice to highlight this as a story, right? So in a way, you are saying that, though. Like, you're highlighting this story because you largely agree with it. Like, playing this off as like, oh, well, it's not me saying it, it's the trans activists, right?
This lengthy piece published in the New York Times this week really did delve into it. So
now, I also wanted to go back a little bit here. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, right here.
Growing less empathetic to the transgender cause. But what's behind it? What's
behind it? What an excellent question. Now, I just want to point out something here, which is that there's a really, let's take a look at polling. Let's take a look at the polling really quick, okay? And by the polling, I mean specifically, let's take a look at Pew Research Center and where people were on transgender Americans back in 2022. That's 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
Oh, most favor protecting trans people from discrimination, even as growing shares say gender is determined by sex at birth. 64% of people were in favor, said they were strongly in favor or favored laws or policies that would protect transgender people from discrimination in jobs, housing, and public spaces.
Okay.
That's a pretty big number. Now, I'm just going to grant that support for trans rights has gone down over
yes, it
the
has.
last 2 years.
Yep, sure has.
Can anyone think of anything that may have caused the downswing in support for trans rights?
Yeah, I can think of a few off the top of my head. I don't have a list. I don't have notes or anything. Let's see. Men forcing their way onto women's sports teams, which is widely seen as cheating. What happened at the Olympics, which was a travesty. More and more men who may or may not be cross-dressing or even attempting to look female, claiming to be female and forcing their way into women's spaces. The discovery that men are being locked up behind bars with female prisoners, and that women are getting punished when they complain about it and threatened with longer prison sentences, or having prison officials go to the parole boards to give an unfavorable review when these women are up for parole. A male patient in a women's ward at an NHS hospital raping another patient and having the hospital cover up for a year and claiming to the authorities that there was no man on the ward at the time, and gaslighting the victim into kingdom come. I mean, we've seen one thing after another, after another, after another, and not to mention the fact that people finally woke up and said, you know what, trans women really aren't women, and men cannot become women and vice versa. And why are we falling for this old okie doke? This is not a question of rights anymore. This is now a question of special privileges for a certain class of people at the expense of an entire class of other people. That's what happened. Now let me guess. This one is going to talk about the Trump ad. Just guessing. All right, let's go.
Just using your common knowledge and critical thinking skills. Anybody? Bueller? Trump.
Oh.
Punky gal. You brilliant chatter, you. Yeah. It's almost like someone came through and dropped almost $250 million on anti-trans ads.
No. Okay. I think that we need to have a clarification here. All right. The reason that those ads were effective is because they addressed an issue that had already been burbling in the public conversation in the West for quite some time. I am getting a little bit tired of people like Matt Walsh and others claiming or appropriating this fight for themselves and saying, don't worry, ladies, I am here to save you, because you're all obviously too weak and too co-opted to be able to help yourselves. I would like to remind everyone that the fight against this movement started among, guess who? Left-wing feminists. People like Julie Bindel, people like J.K. Rowling, people like Kathleen Stock. There are so many names, and a lot of names of women that we don't know, but women who have been threatened with arrest, women who have been who have had their livelihoods taken away, women who have gotten death threats, rape threats, women whose families have been threatened. This has been going on for years. It was going on for years before Trump seized on it, before Matt Walsh heard about it, before the right wing took it up. It was a movement that was started by left-wing feminists of the old school, Gen X and boomer feminists, not the younger ones, the older ones, the third wave and second wave, not the fourth wave. So let's get that straight. This is not a new phenomenon, but in the past 2 years, things have gotten so out of hand that more and more people are listening now. Did Matt Walsh help? Yeah, he did. He did, because he had a bigger microphone and a bigger platform. But the Trump ad would not have been as effective if it hadn't already been, these thoughts hadn't already been simmering in the public consciousness. That's how that works.
And you might say, like, well, it's like I'm sorry, that generally intense media scrutiny of trans issues tends to cause a lot of fear and uncertainty around what the actual data says and around how conservatives feel they should treat or accept trans people. And that in turn leads to a lower rate of acceptance for trans people. It's not really that hard to figure out. Elon Musk dropped $250 million on top of that amount of money on like anti-trans ads and political organizing for Trump. Like, so much money went into fear-mongering about trans people. It's like, whoa, why did this happen? Was it your local protest group that has trans flags showing up at the Capitol building and like shaking signs? Or was it, you know, almost $500 million being spent fear-mongering on the internet and at sporting events and on television and on the...
Or maybe it also had something to do with that Pride event at the White House, where there was at least one person who was shaking her naked boobs on the White House lawn. It was unseemly behavior. It was the invasion of the bathrooms. It was the incredibly hostile and, what is the word I'm looking for? The aggressive stance that a lot of these trans activists took. And again, if you are just a regular garden variety trans person, you are probably deeply ashamed of the behavior of these trans activists, and you don't believe that they represent your interests. Because when you've got a bunch of activists who show up and they start agitating, and the movement starts to roll back, then you've got a problem. And not only have these trans activists hurt the trans community, they've hurt the gay community as well. Now, the gay organizations did not help themselves by backing this stuff 100% and backing the medicalization and operating on children. They didn't help by lionizing people like Desmond is amazing. They didn't help by advocating for positions that were very extreme. Keep in mind, it was a conservative Supreme Court that legalized gay marriage across the entire nation. A conservative Supreme Court legalized that. And now we have that Tennessee case before the court that was argued horribly by the ACLU, by that lawyer, Strangio. And we are going to see a lot of changes, because the positions that have been taken by these organizations have been perceived as being way too extreme. The country doesn't want it. The country had a very let live and let live attitude until all of these behaviors and these actions, the women's sports issue, women's private spaces, men invading rape crisis centers, men invading every conceivable woman's space, women's locker rooms. It became too much. And the country started saying, no, it's too much now. It's too much.
Radio. I'm guessing it's the $500 million. Okay? So let's move on. But I wanted to kind of establish that up front, because I feel like we're going to be coming back to these points.
Social media in particular, some of you might have seen time and time again, like advocates for the cause being pretty aggressive. And look, it comes from a good place. This is just about the tactics, right?
Again, you may have seen a lot of people being aggressive on social media, advocates for the cause. not all of us trans people don't know each other. We aren't organized into a coherent, cohesive block. We're just mad. We're just mad people who are having our rights threatened or outright taken away.
What rights, though?
This isn't like us getting together and being like, okay, guys, we need a solid strat on this one. Let's go bully people who are transphobic. It's like, no, it's just that people in the trans community don't like transphobes. So we're going to be rude to transphobes or people peddling in transphobic bullshit. It's not rocket science here.
Aggressively going after anyone they see as...
Oh, sorry. And if you think that that's like, oh, well, that's keeping your entire movement back. It's like, well, you know that in any kind of social movement, there are going to be people who get mad at folks who treat them poorly. That's true in any kind of movement for progress anywhere.
Right.
Sometimes people are uncouth. And that's okay. Because they're not the faces of the movement. They're just some girl in thigh-high socks on Twitter.
Like stepping out of line, saying anything that might be deemed insensitive toward the trans community. For example, after a Democratic congressman defended parents who expressed concern about transgender athletes competing against their young daughters, a local party official and ally compared him to a Nazi cooperator. Okay, and a group called Neighbors Against Hate organized a protest outside his office. But look, the example that was detailed...
Oh no, somebody called him a rude word? I'm sorry, like, that's not news. That's not a news story. Someone being rude to like a Democratic operative is not worthy of note, really.
Oh, really? So you think that calling a Democratic congressman, not an operative, he's a congressman, a Nazi because he expressed a very legitimate concern. You don't think that that's a bad idea? You don't think that that paints the movement in a bad light? All right. No, it's not rude. That's not rude. That is an open provocation and an invitation for more extreme action to be taken. And this is why nobody can take you seriously. Because if you're not willing to concede on any point that doesn't involve forcing your point of view and your rights over the rights of young girls or women, then we're not going to get anywhere in this conversation. We're not. But let's continue.
You don't have an op-ed written about me every time someone says something bigoted to me. This isn't news.
In this piece that really bothered me is the one I'm about to
Also, Lady Ringcloud, that's true. Calling someone a Nazi is only rude if they're not a Nazi. If they are doing Nazi shit, that's just accurate.
Okay, and again, I am sick and tired of the word Nazi being thrown around so loosely to describe an individual who made a very sensible point. I'm sick of it. We need to be more mindful of our language here. And you sit there and you wonder why support for the transgender movement, why support for these activists has gone backwards. You're really wondering now. You really don't get it. All right. Let's go.
Okay. So last week, as we all know, Nancy Mace, and she's continued it like this week. Like she's engaging in this really disgusting harassment campaign against an incoming transgender member of Congress, first openly transgender member of Congress to, serve in the House. And her name is Sarah McBride. And just preemptively off the, right after the election where Trump proved to be successful, partly because of airing an ad about Democrat support for transgender people, you have Nancy Mace try to capitalize on that, try to kind of piggyback off of that. And that's why I believe she's been attacking Sarah McBride pretty aggressively. But you would think the transgender community, or at least the activists, would support Sarah McBride and want to protect her. But
trans people and activists do want to protect Sarah McBride. No one's out there, or maybe someone is, but the vast majority of trans people, activists, posters even, want her to be safe. They want...
Safe from what? Safe from what? Please, could somebody please tell me what kind of a threat is Sarah McBride under? Sarah McBride has already said, point blank, that she is not going to use the women's bathroom. She has no intention of going into the women's bathroom. And so you could say that the whole Nancy Mace thing is a manufactured controversy, but it isn't, because it is not a measure, it is not a rule that is going to be taken up by the House or that is going to be passed. I think it may have been passed already, I'm not sure, that is directed at a single person. It is a general ban. Sarah McBride is not in danger. Sarah McBride is a member of Congress. Sarah McBride is going to have the protection of the Capitol Police should anything happen to her or any serious threat be leveled at her, like they have been at Nancy Mace, for example. I mean, people have gone online and openly threatened to kill Nancy Mace. I've seen it myself. Sarah McBride is not in danger. Sarah McBride has the full protection that any elected official on the Hill has. So I don't understand what all this fear-mongering is about. It's absurd.
Her to be able to use the bathroom that aligns with her gender identity. They want her to triumph over these bathroom bans because they know that if she doesn't, they're also going to get banned from the bathroom.
I haven't heard that.
And so
what
a lot of trans folks and activists really wanted was to see Sarah McBride take a defiant stance and overcome, whether that is staging a bathroom sit-in, which, by the way, just happened recently at the Capitol building, and getting arrested over it. That sends a powerful message. It does. And instead, she said she would comply with the laws of the body, which seemed to really kind of align with saying, well, I will acquiesce to you treating me as a gender I am not. And that's deeply dispiriting for the people in the trans community to see, because it sets the tone. She's the most powerful elected trans official. And so it's dispiriting to see her, someone who has made history for our particular group of people, accept treatment as if she is lesser. That's a blow. And I understand people being upset by that. Am I saying you should it's good to harass her? Absolutely not. You should not harass her. Not everyone finds that it is particularly easy to rise to a difficult occasion with radical action. That's not necessarily an easy thing to do, right?
Okay. But Sarah McBride is not a radical person.
It's disappointing, but that's not a call to be angry at her. But I understand people being angry, if that makes sense. It's because we're angry at the system around her.
Well, yeah, but the irony here is that Sarah McBride is exactly the kind of transgender person who just wants to live her life. Okay? And she concedes that there are going to be issues, and she herself has said, I'm just going to be a congresswoman who represents my district and focuses on big issues. It's absurd. Just let Sarah McBride get into office, right? Let Sarah McBride legislate. Let Sarah McBride do her thing. By the way, every single congressional office has a private bathroom, okay? And Sarah McBride has already said that she's not going to use the women's bathroom. I think that issue is resolved. But again, it's not about Sarah McBride. It's a general blanket issue. And we saw what happened afterwards. You had Chelsea Manning go up there. You had that whole crew go up there with meeting in the ladies' room and all that. That is what we are trying to avoid, is the activists going in and using, again, exploiting a female-only private space to make a political point. Women have a right, females have a right to private spaces. Females. And for some reason, there is kind of like an understanding that we have to give up our private spaces for the benefit of others. No, we don't. We really don't. And it's not just about bathrooms, it's about locker rooms. It's about sports teams. It's about jobs. Somebody pointed out the other day that there was also the matter of awards, Women of the Year awards being given to men. I mean, it's enough now. It's enough. Let's continue.
And yeah, it's a shitty situation all around.
That unfortunately has not been the case. In fact, they are saying that she is a voice for her constituents rather than a voice for the transgender movement. And then they accused her of capitulating to the right. She has done no such thing at all. Okay, the fact that now she's getting this kind of hate from activists really upsets me. But look, that kind of strategy.
But also, like, I'm sorry, but you can't say this about the trans movement is getting mad at her. Who? Like, who are you talking about? Are you talking about, like, the Center for Transgender Equality? Are they mad at Sarah McBride? Or are you talking about people on Twitter? Like, are you talking about...
Wait a minute. Didn't this person just say that people were hoping that Sarah McBride was going to lead by example as the top elected trans official in the country? Didn't this person just say that? Am I misremembering? Or... So clearly people are upset, and it's not just a bunch of randos on Twitter. Now, the problem is that Sarah McBride took the wind out of people's sails when she said, look, you know, I'm just here to do a job, and I will use a single stall bathroom. I'm not going to go into the women's room. And Sarah McBride is not up there to be, you know, a fire-eating barn burner. So I think that people were disappointed with that, but I think that it was a very dignified response. Sarah McBride was elected to represent a district in Delaware. That is what Sarah McBride was elected to do. Not to go up there and run a personal agenda campaign. And this is a responsible thing for a member of Congress to do. I wish that more members of Congress would remember that they were elected to represent voters in a district. Or if you're a senator, if you're a senator from a state, that you are there to represent the interests of your constituents. That's what you're there to do. And too many of these showboats, these show ponies, have forgotten that that's what they're elected to do. Listen, I'm such an idealist. I know. I've been around politicians all my life. I know exactly how they operate. But I have been very impressed with Sarah McBride's behavior throughout this whole thing. Very impressed. And I hope that she continues along that path. I do. So let's continue.
Random posters on Twitter. Are you talking about, like, actual activists in the community? Like, who are you talking about? Because there's been no cited example except for the nebulous trans activists and trans movement. Who? Trans activists have names. Trans activist groups have names. Name one. Unless you're just talking about people online, and you've been online forever on the UIT. You guys know people just say shit. People say angry, bigoted, mean stuff all the time.
Okay.
While pushing their political ideas.
Yeah, we've seen it. Okay.
But it's not a news story when non-trans people do it. So I have to wonder, why is it a news story when trans people do it? It's not a big deal. These are just people. Angry people. They're not a group working in coordination if they're just posters on Twitter.
Look, are you trying to get attention or are you not trying to get attention? I'm sorry, you need to make up your mind. I'm not following this argument. Yeah, it's true. There are a lot of irrational, unhinged trolls on Twitter. No question. and over on Blue Sky and all over the internet. Okay, we all agree. And they may not represent an official, ruling from the chair. But nobody knows who's in charge of this movement. There is no one in charge of this movement, is there? But the problem is that when we have seen organizations that have taken up a cause, when it comes to this community, these positions have proven to be deeply unpopular. We're dealing with everything from kids being medicated, the medical establishment, the political establishment, the teachers' unions. Now we're finding out that guidance counselors are involved in this mess, all the way up to the taking away women's spaces, encroaching on women's rights, encroaching on women being able to speak their minds freely without getting death and rape threats, or in the case of the United Kingdom, being arrested for misgendering or whatever. I mean, at a certain point, everybody has to cool their jets, right? So let's continue.
Also doesn't really seem to be working. It's actually been pretty counterproductive for the transgender community. More than 24 red states now limit access to transition medical treatment, and public opinion is actually trending in the opposite direction.
What's fascinating to me about this framing is that it puts the onus on trans activist groups for the conservative legislation. Trans activists, through their advocacy, did not pass that legislation. That was Republicans. The Republicans did that. And you might argue like, oh, well, the trans activists didn't stop it. Yeah, because they lack the political power to do that in those states. Republicans want to eliminate them from society. Like, I'm sorry, putting this down to like some trans posters on Twitter causing dozens of states to adopt anti-trans policies. When again, remember earlier in this video where we pointed towards hundreds of millions of dollars being dropped on anti-trans advertising? And that's not even counting like the ungodly, untold number of monies that are spent at like Daily Wire on anti-trans fear-mongering. That's not counting like the think tanks that are lobbying on anti-trans policies. It's not taught that like, who is doing this? Who is responsible for the legislation? It's conservatives. Who's responsible for the shift in opinion? It's conservatives.
Bullshit. Give the left-wing feminists some credit, please. I just reeled off a bunch of names. Julie Bindel has been battling this for years. Julie Bindel is not a conservative. J.K. Rowling is not a conservative. The women who were at the forefront of this fight were left-wing feminists. Don't drop this at the feet of the conservatives. They were late to the game, okay? After a bunch of women had already gone public and gotten brutalized in public and private for stating their opinions, had their lives turned upside down, had their lives fucking ruined. Now, J.K. Rowling can afford to do it because she has got fuck you money, and so she can go out there and be the public face. She can afford private security. She's got plenty of money. Nobody's going to take her job away. Nobody's going to take her money away. She's got more than enough money to go out and sue everybody. Hey, Triggered Andy. Triggered Andy, thank you so much for that very, very generous donation. It is very good to see you. Thank you for the compliment. And I'm very, very glad to see you here. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, let's continue.
Trans activists don't have billionaires supporting them and creating entire media companies around them in order to propagate pro-trans narratives.
Because the conservatives are in power. And they're in power with a huge mandate based on the recent election. That's how that works. Let's continue.
Trans advocates just have themselves. The framing is so bad that I can only conclude it's intentional, which is why I wanted to talk about this.
These advocates were pushing for. Fewer Americans today than 2 years ago say they support allowing children to undergo gender transition treatment, according to the Public Religion Research Institute. I will say the Public Religion Research Institute very clearly would have a bias, so I would take their data with...
You know, I should have prepped this part. I prepped a lot of other things for this segment, but the... sorry, what was it called again?
Research Institute.
Public Religion. You know, let's take a look. Oh, they work with the Brookings Institute. That makes sense. Yeah.
As
they're
a
deeply
trans activist, I am the
Wait. Is she saying, or is this person, I hate calling them she, is this person suggesting that the Brookings Institute is deeply conservative? The Brookings Institute is not deeply conservative. Is this person confusing Brookings with Heritage? Brookings is not deeply conservative. That is false. That is categorically false. But then again, the Overton window has shifted so much. Thank you, Lava. It is good to see you. Long time no see. Welcome. Now I lost my train of thought. Lava distracted me. I'm just so happy to see you here. It's all your fault, Lava. You have derailed the entire stream with your presence. I'm just joking. Well, not really, because I literally do not remember what I was saying. No, Brookings is not conservative. It isn't. Oh, the Overton window. That's what I was saying. The Overton window has shifted so radically that now I am considered to be a swivel-eyed loon right-winger, which I am not. No, Brookings is not conservative. It isn't, but let's continue.
Only trans voice in all the groups I am advocating for our rights within the greater Dayton, Ohio area. I have just me. WTF is she talking about?
Yeah, like, unironically, I think what she's talking about is people on Twitter. You know, this is, I genuinely, I think that a lot of this downfall is like Twitter brain rot in like terminal stages. Yeah, they have a deep bias, but you know, take them seriously.
Very clearly would have a bias. So I would take their data with some grain of salt. But nonetheless, you kind of see it when it comes to public opinion. So I remember in 2016, when Republicans were trying to make the bathroom issue a big deal, the majority of Americans weren't buying it. The majority of Americans are like, no, stop harassing transgender people. It's the bathroom. Like,
I was one of the people who wasn't buying it back then.
I do think it gets a little tricky though when it comes to other, you know, gender segregated or sex segregated spaces like a women's locker room and all of that. I don't want to get into the details, but like when it comes to the bathroom, most Americans were on the side of allowing transgender people to use the bathroom they identify with. That's right. Kind of changing now. I'm actually seeing a lot of support toward Nancy Mace and a lot of backlash toward the trans community. A 2024 YouGov poll found that 36% of Americans say societal acceptance of transgender people has gone too far. And that's actually a 7 percentage point increase since 2018.
That's a lot.
Numbers like that have led to some people rethinking their strategy. So Rodrigo Heng, I don't want to mispronounce his name, but Rodrigo Heng Littinen, who's the executive director of Advocates for Transgender Equality, argues, quote,
now, it was at this point that I was like, wait a minute, what is this piece that Anna's reading from? You know, we haven't heard that much about the actual New York Times piece that she's citing throughout all of this, right? It's simply a piece in the New York Times. So the question being, which piece is it? Now, one of the nice things about TYT, and I do appreciate this about them, is that they often cite their source in the description. So, of course, I followed up on that. I went and I looked at their source and...
Okay.
Well, wouldn't you know what I found? Found this article from the New York Times. Transgender activists question the movement's confrontational approach. Diminishing public support, some activists say. All or nothing tactics are not working. We have to make it okay for someone to change their minds. Huh,
hey, Mary.
Interesting premise. Let's see. Oh, this is from Rodrigo Hanglettinen.
I love how nobody knows how to pronounce his name.
Transgender equality. And then I stopped because I was like, Jeremy W. Peters.
Oh no, here we go. Attack the messenger, right? Let's do that.
Where have I heard Jeremy W. Peters' name before?
I've never heard of him.
Where have I heard that?
Sorry.
And then I remembered. I heard that name from this article a few months ago. Critics say Musk has revealed himself as a conservative. It's not so simple. Elon Musk has... sorry, this is from 2 years ago, not a few months ago. Sorry.
Oh, it's 2 years ago.
About political topics regularly since taking over Twitter, often belittling some liberal causes. But what he stands for remains largely unclear, which is only something you can say if you are a moron or a deliberate fool. And I think Jeremy W. Peters is, in fact, one of those deliberate fools. Maybe also a moron, but that remains to be seen. So you can get a job at the New York Times writing nothing but lies. Oh, Gamergy, this guy got his bachelor's degree and then went and wrote as a journalist in the Virgin Islands for like a local Virgin Islands newspaper for like 3 years.
And
went to Detroit, worked there for like 2 years, and then immediately got hired by the New York Times. And apparently was writing as a contributor for the New York Times while he was still getting his degree. All of which to me indicates like it's not passing the sniff test. That seems hella weird. That seems really...
Does it seem hella weird? To me, that is a really healthy trajectory for a journalist. You're not supposed to, at the New York Times, at ABC, at any of these big media organizations, you're not supposed to hire kids right out of J school. You know, it's supposed to be, well, it used to be, if you wanted to work in TV, you had to start at the local level, you know, covering fire calls and the police and doing those beats and the parades and all that shit, local government, and then you worked your way up until you finally made it to the network level. That's how it used to be. Or, you know, the networks at one point decided that they were going to start recruiting from print. So they would go to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and put these print reporters on TV. But print reporters who had a lot of experience. So if you're going to go from the Virgin Islands to Detroit and then end up at the New York Times, that would actually be a better trajectory than just getting hired straight out of Medill or Mizzou or Columbia or wherever you went to J school with no experience whatsoever and working at a big paper. Or you're supposed to start at the very bottom and work your way up if you do get hired at one of those organizations. I don't understand what is so suspicious about this unless you know nothing about the way that the business operates, but okay.
Really weird, and like some shit was going on. Yeah, maybe nepotism much? Yeah. Anyway.
Nepotism? What nepotism?
I also just wanted to bring up another thing, which is that Anna's about to bring up this guy, right? This guy who is actually the face of the article here. This Rodrigo Hanglettinen, right?
All right.
And one thing that's really important to know about him as executive director of Advocates for Transgender Equality is that the day after this article went up, Advocates for Transgender Equality had to release a statement because the New York Times article written by this Jeremy fellow quoted him out of context. So he had to release a follow-up statement because of the out-of-context quote that the author of that article does, that does him dirty here, okay?
All right, fine.
Yesterday, New York Times ran an article in which I was quoted as saying, "We have to make it okay for someone to change their minds, and we cannot vilify them for not being on our side. No one wants to join that team." Because my quotes were taken out of context, I'd like to clarify what I meant. Those statements were regarding how to persuade everyday, undecided people in public, not people who have already taken actions to oppose our equality.
I'm sorry, but does this statement ring to you like a distinction without a difference? I don't understand why. I mean, if the guy was quoted out of context, by all means, he won't be the first and he's not going to be the last. And please don't mistake my rebuttal to this individual as a defense of the New York Times, which is a paper that has gone into rapid decline, along with the Post and other newspapers. The Post is not the same paper that it was when Marty Baron was editing it. He was an incredible executive editor at the Post. And the combination of Marty Baron and Jeff Bezos was incredible. I mean, just an amazing combination. Brought the Washington Post back to its glory days of Ben Bradley and Mrs. Graham. The New York Times has been riddled with problems. I mean, terrible issues with accuracy and fairness and balance and all that kind of stuff. But I don't understand why this statement in any way undermines what was said in the original article. It was one quote in a lengthy article about a general mood shift in the country, but okay.
Extreme right politicians targeting the trans community is the reason we are having this conversation at all. So I want to ensure that no one misinterprets our message to the community. A4TE's approach has not changed. We will continue confronting the institutions making the rules, and we will be at Capitol Hill and in the courts fighting to change the rules to build power for trans people. Trans people doing the best they can to live with respect and dignity are not the enemy. We are angry because extremists would like to ban us from bathrooms and control the decisions we make with our doctors. Make no mistake about who the opposition is here. We're gearing up for the fight of our lives against the incoming administration, and we are not backing off. For nearly a decade, trans advocates have been holding the line against thousands of anti-trans state bills and vile rhetoric to prevent the erosion of hard-fought progress. Now, more than ever, we need to use every tool we have because we cannot afford to cede any ground to anti-equality forces, and we are prepared to confront this period of uncertainty and hardship with the work our community relies upon.
Okay,
we will
fine.
fight, we will organize, we will testify, we will march. Trans people have faced political and legal oppression before, and we will look back at our history to guide us on how we move forward. We cannot, however, allow our fear to provoke us to lose our values, because our values will sustain us. We can only survive what is to come if we hold on to each other and our ability to be decent and kind and just, because we are fighting for a future in which trans people are no less than equal.
Okay, that statement, I'm going to read into that statement a bit. I think that what happened was when the article came out, this individual whose name nobody can pronounce probably got a very angry series of calls from the board of directors, from donors and others who were like, what the fuck are you saying? And so he had to release this lengthy statement to explain what he actually meant. Again, he won't be the first or the last to have a quote trimmed to be able to fit into a newspaper. All right. And it may be that the reporter wasn't even the one who decided to trim the quote. It could have been a copy editor if there's still copy editors employed at the New York Times, for length purposes. I've had this happen to me too, where I've written a piece for a newspaper. And when the piece comes out, I get these angry calls from people that I interviewed. Where's my quote? Why didn't you feature me? Well, I did, but they cut it out. So it's just, I mean, not everything is a grassy knoll, okay? But, if the guy wants to release a statement clarifying what he said to the reporter, then, okay, now we know what he meant. All right, let's continue.
So, again, he was quoted as saying, we cannot vilify them for not being on our side. No one wants to join that team. And we have to make it okay for someone to change their minds, without the very critical context that he was talking about undecided people, undecided or ignorant people, right? Who are not actively trying to harm us.
Okay.
So I feel like that's a really important thing to know about this article. And I want to point out, This article went up November 26th.
Okay. Yeah.
Anna's video went up 5 days ago on December 1st.
Mm-hmm.
There was time for this video to, acknowledge that the quote was taken out of context. That particularly the quote that is on screen right now was taken out of context. So, and I haven't been watching TYT religiously lately, so I'm unsure. Maybe someone who has can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they've issued any correction on this. I don't think they've talked about how there's been additional clarification from the activists interviewed for this article that they were done dirty.
Okay.
Weird.
We have to make it okay for someone to change their minds. We cannot vilify them for not being on our side. No one wants to join that team. And he says no one wants to feel stupid or condescended to. Another advocate named Mara Kiesling, who founded the National Center for Transgender Equality back in 2002, remembered an adage that she used 20 years ago about the...
Now, far be it from me to nitpick here, but this is also not the first time she's stumbled over pronouns for trans people on the air. She doesn't do that for non-trans people.
Because it's not an issue. Because it's not an issue for non-trans people. Because we don't make a big fuss about it. Because it doesn't matter. Do you know how many people have accused me of being a man? Do you know how many people have said that I was born a man, that I'm masculine presenting, that, I ignore it. What do I care? I mean, it's just people being stupid. So what?
Fucking pronouns!
Legislative priorities. You can't say don't fire them until you can say don't kill them, meaning that advocates should focus first on measures that reinforce the fundamental humanity of transgender people, such as hate crime protections. Then she said you can push more effectively for laws about discrimination. And she also argues that activists lost credibility with many Americans once they started accusing people of bigotry for having concerns about trans women in high-level sports. We looked unreasonable. We should be talking about the 7-year-old who just wants to play soccer with her friends.
Now I'm going to pause here because I understand what Mara Kiesling is trying to say here, which is that, it's the optically difficult to argue against a 500-pound bodybuilder could just say she's a woman that compete against ladies. That's bad. That's hard to argue against when your opponents are conservative dipshits, right? The issue is you need to attack that underlying assumption, because they're just going to move it to the hyperbolized version that they've imagined in their heads. Whether it's a 7-year-old playing school sports or a 25-year-old bodybuilder.
Hi, Raven.
So you need to attack the fundamental premise of what they're arguing, which is that trans people should not be allowed to compete in the sports of their that they identify with, right?
No, they shouldn't.
You need to attack that. And one might say, well, what about, why aren't you focusing on the hate crime stuff? And it's well, you can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. You can do more than that. There's some people who are expert on sport medicine. They are better suited for that conversation. But I will also just throw this out there, right? When we look back at past civil rights struggles, one of the things that we see are those civil rights struggles also playing out within the realm of sports. This isn't a new premise. Trying to say, well, this is a distraction. What was fighting Jim Crow by fighting to desegregate sports?
That is completely different. That is completely different. I mean, listen, if you want a system where men and women compete with one another across the board with absolutely no distinction being made, then just say it. Just say it. But don't try to sneak in this caveat that, well, if you take hormones for X amount of time, then that completely undoes the changes that are made to a man's body or a male's body during puberty. That is false. It is a false premise. It's not correct. Now, if you have a transgender person who wants to compete in sports where you have co-ed teams, whether it's equestrian sports, whether it's shooting competitions, there are sports at the Olympics, at the highest level of competition, where men and women compete together. And nobody's arguing that transgender people cannot compete there. I mean, it's not fair to take a spot that would have gone to a woman and give it to a transgender man or a trans woman. But, you know, we can make accommodations. Thank you, Raven, for gifting a membership. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And whoever got the membership, enjoy it. But again, it's this denial of biological reality that drives me crazy. That drives me crazy. And people aren't buying it. I'm sorry, but this issue is a non-starter. You guys need to stop being so scatterbrained or so scattered in your approach for what rights you want and what rights matter, and go back to basics, because the sports thing is not working. Did you see that the Biden administration just pulled back and took back the changes that they made to Title IX regarding women's sports? They've given up. They've taken their ball and they've gone home. I mean, all of those changes would have been upended and repealed during the Trump administration anyway. But even the Biden administration had to concede, you know what, we're not getting anywhere with this. It's not a winning strategy. Now, it's a little late in the day, and I could be conciliatory and say, well, better late than never. It never should have happened in the first place. But let's continue.
Was that a mistake? Was it genuinely? I'm kind of baffled by this argument, right? Like, the history of like integrating sports in more progressive ways would indicate that that is actually a component of the civil rights struggle, right?
Okay. All right.
I mean, yeah, iconic.
It's not the same thing. Not the same thing.
And
not even
it really
close.
Does just seem to me that I feel like some people just don't get it, right? That a lot of people are just like, oh, well, it's just, you know, we're making a huge mistake by arguing this. And it's like, who's making the mistake? Because is it your organization that you help run? No? Oh, do you just mean people on Twitter are arguing that actually they think it'd be a good idea? Because that's just people acting as individuals. That's not the movement as a whole. However, maybe more organizations should throw their weight behind integrating sports. You know, just a thought. Just a thought. Now, moving right along.
And look, this is the critical takeaway from the piece. Advocates say that their research had found that the most effective messaging takes into account that most Americans do not know a lot about life as a transgender person, and reinforce the basic idea that transgender people want what everyone else wants: fairness, respect, and love.
Which, by the way, all of those things are demonstrated and fostered when trans kids and people are allowed to compete alongside cisgender people with the gender of their heart, you know?
Nope.
Like,
hard disagree.
You can't say
nope.
that you can't say that you're reinforcing the idea that trans people are equal and want all the same things if you cede the ground of sports. Yeah, Crystal Hazer says, I'm someone suited for that conversation. Transphobes frustrated me to no end with their willful ignorance and resistance to understanding science when it's laid out for them. Yeah, I've looked into the science, by the way.
What science?
I've been paying attention to the sports science around transgender athletes for years now.
Oh, the sports science.
And guys, guess what? The only real discussion to be had here is not whether or not trans kids or trans adults should be able to play in sports that align with their gender identity. The only question is, once puberty starts being at play here, do they need to be on HRT 1 year or 2 years? That's it. That's the only question. Because
no, that's not the only question. That's not the only question, because Leah Thomas was on HRT for how long? And blew those women out of the water. Leah Thomas had gone through puberty. Once you go through puberty, all bets are off. A year or two of HRT cannot reverse the physical advantages that puberty affords men. Whether it's the development of the heart, the development of the lungs, the bones, everything. You cannot undo puberty with 1 or 2 years of HRT after you've already gone through puberty. It doesn't work that way. And why do you think that this conversation is so one-sided? Why do you think that you don't see female to male transgender people clamoring to compete with men in men's sports? Maybe we will see it one day, but we're not seeing it now. It's one way only. And don't think that people haven't noticed that. And by the way, the recent shit show at the Olympics has totally closed this door. I don't think that anyone who watched that mess transpire with the Algerian boxer and the Taiwanese boxer is in any mood to have this conversation. So why don't you have a conversation about that? Why is it that female to male athletes are not, pushing to qualify for men's track and field or men's boxing? Let's have that conversation if we're capable of doing so.
All of the science indicates that after 1 year or 2 years, depending, that's the one point of nebulousness here. When do trans people generally reach parity with cis people? When transitioning, right? And that's really the only real question. So why would you cede the ground when instead you could educate and advocate? Your job is to advocate. If you are an advocate, definitionally, why cede the ground? Especially if your goal is to show that trans people want and desire all of the same things and to be treated the same as everyone else in society. Why would you cede that ground? A ground that is, by the way, considered by the vast majority of people a place of relative equality. And
what vast majority of people?
Everyone in the country pays attention to. People pay attention to sports. Trans people should be able to participate in that.
Yeah. Nobody's saying you can't participate. Nobody is saying that trans people are banned from competing in sports. Nobody is saying that. They're saying that if you are competing in a sport that involves strength and speed, you cannot compete if you are a male person against women. That is the issue. That is the issue. Go compete against men if that is your issue, or start a completely separate category. How about that? Start a separate category. But because there is no definition of what transgender means anymore, you don't have to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. You don't have to live as a member of the opposite sex for a year, I guess it used to be, before you can move forward with the rest of the treatment, the operation, and so on. You can't do it. You don't have to do that anymore. You just stand up, you make a declaration, you say, I am a woman, and now you're a woman, and you are afforded the privileges or whatever of being a woman. The Algerian boxer, who was put in a bit of a rock and a hard place position, was raised as a girl. But that is because the medical technology that exists in Algeria, in a remote village in the middle of nowhere, you're going to take a look at the kid and say, all right, well, it looks like a girl to me. This child appears to be female, even though they have certain characteristics that would align with male. But as the child grows and you see the way the child is developing, same thing with Caster Semenya, the same exact situation. And you don't know that the child has internal testes or that the child is producing testosterone at a much higher level. And the child is raised and socialized as a girl. That is a terrible position to be in. Because the kid doesn't know any better, the parents don't know any better, but you know who does know better? The coaches know better. The doctors, when you start to reach a certain level of excellence in competition, the doctors know better. But now the Olympic Committee has said, oh, we can't even do a cheek scraping anymore because it's too invasive. Now, Leah Thomas was not allowed to compete in the swimming competition, but the boxers were allowed to compete. It's incredible. There is no universal standard at the Olympics anymore. The whole thing has become a farce. And everyday ordinary people look at that and say, what the hell is going on here?
Now, obviously not everyone agrees, but before we get to that, curious what you think, Waz.
Now, very interesting here. I'm just gonna look here because there's a lot going on here. Remember at the beginning when she talked about a Democratic congressman defended parents who expressed concern about transgender athletes competing against their young daughters. A local party official and ally compared him to a Nazi cooperator, and a group called Neighbors Against Hate organized a protest outside of his office. That's strange. Let's read a little bit more about that. Let's see. Oh, I can't actually read this. I haven't subscribed. That's too bad. Let's see. Protesters descend on Democratic congressman's office over transgender comments. That's weird. It doesn't sound like he's defending parents. It sounds like he made some comments. Let's read here. Yes, outside of Seth Moulton's Salem office, and appeared full of individuals hoisting various pride flags. Let's see here. Salem City Councilor-elect Kyle Davis issued an invite for the event to Salem residents last week, calling for attendees to show support for the LGBT community. Quote, join us in a celebration of the trans and queer community. Our aim for this event is to communicate loud and clear to that we love and stand in solidarity with the trans community on the North Shore. This is a time when we need local leaders to stand with us and reaffirm our commitment to the LGBT plus community.
All right, and?
What are they protesting exactly outside of his office? The demonstration follows Representative Moulton issuing sharp criticism to the Democratic Party in the wake of the presidential election.
Yeah.
Democrats spend way too much time trying not to offend anyone rather than being brutally honest about the challenges many Americans face. I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. Representative Moulton said earlier this month that he stands firmly in his belief for the need for competitive women's sports to put limits on the participation of those with the unfair physical advantages that come with being born male.
What's wrong with that?
That's transphobia.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Defending concerned parents and being like, well, we have concerned parents in the community, and we need to respect all constituents. This isn't like some even-handed like, yes, I must protect my constituents' rights. He himself was transphobic on multiple occasions and directly advocated for transphobic policies that have also been advocated for by Republicans.
Oh, okay. Okay. See, this is the amalgam technique. This person identifies as basically as a tankie. They haven't stood up and said, I am a tankie, but all of their political beliefs align with those of the tankies. This is the amalgam technique. This is a very Stalinist method of debate. When you run out of arguments, you just start slinging around ad homs. And you bring doubt on a person's character by suggesting that they are some dark and terrible thing. A phobe, a bigot, a racist, or whatever, fill in the blank. It doesn't even matter. It's all interchangeable. It is not a transphobic comment for a father to express concern about the safety of his kids on the playing field. It is also not not a bigoted remark to say that a person with a greater physical advantage could injure your kids or injure a fellow teammate, unwittingly perhaps, but certainly it is a greater risk in any sport that involves strength and speed. It's just a fact of life. Let's continue.
So that's just paragraph number 2, chat. And guess what? I'm going to read you the opening paragraph, which is just one sentence, because this article and Jeremy W. Peters are dog shit.
Okay.
Opening sentence. To get on the wrong side of transgender activists is often to endure their unsparing criticism.
You know what? I'm sick of hearing about the article, but let's hear what he says here.
When a movement, when it comes to LGBTQ, just, you know, over time, just like accumulated a lot of wins and felt like a lot of progress. I think it got—
Wait, why are they doing it then? The liberal establishment is highlighting transgender activism as an issue to scapegoat their failures with Kamala Harris, with this campaign. They are saving their asses.
Okay.
Full stop. That is the only reason. They are grasping at straws, and they see trans people. They look at trans people, they're like, they're a convenient punching bag for the right. Let's make them into a punching bag for the left. That's it.
Got to the trans stuff, and, you know, the messaging and the aims became a little bit more aggressive, because there was like, all right, we kind of won all of these victories, right?
Citation needed? Like what is this argument? Like, oh, LGBTQ people were just winning too much, and then they got too aggressive with their asks, and
yeah,
that crossed a line. Motherfucker, Pride started as a riot. What do you mean? What do you mean the fight for trans civil rights got too aggressive? The fight for gay rights, which was started by trans people, by the way.
No, it was fucking not. And this is something. It's the rewriting of gay history for me. I need to hang on a second. I will not allow this to stand, people. I will not allow it to stand. And I am going to post an interview that I did with Fred Sargent. Fred Sargent, who was actually at Stonewall, was present at Stonewall, and who founded Gay Pride. That is an interview that I did with Fred Sargent. And Fred Sargent has been battling this lie for years, because in recent years, the trans movement has tried to co-opt gay history. They spread the lie that Marsha P. Johnson was a major figure at Stonewall. Apparently, Marsha P. Johnson was not even at Stonewall. Marsha P. Johnson was not transgender. Marsha P. Johnson was a drag queen who identified as male his entire life. And it's the lies that have been told to change gay history that have been infuriating. And I'm always very, very suspicious of people who try to rewrite history for their own purposes. It was not trans people who led the gay rights movement. That is a complete and utter fucking lie. That is not true. Were trans people part of the gay rights movement? Of course. But to say that they were the leaders of this movement, that they played a major role at Stonewall, no, that is false. That is unequivocally false. Let's continue.
Literally involved bricks through windows and setting shit on fire. What are you talking about?
Nope.
Right. And I think what we're seeing is a sort of retrenchment from that. I want to say, first of all, just like on this and many issues, like my principles are kind of the same. Like, I don't think you should be able to deny a trans person a job, a way to work because they're trans. You can't deny them housing because they're trans. You can't deny them
Thank you, Stuart's mom.
Because they're trans. Like this.
Okay, all that's good so far. Maybe if you stop talking now, you'll be fine. Maybe.
This is just, you know, these are the basic pillars of civil rights, right? However, on an issue like trans people in sports, when like,
that butt was really big.
Like, you know, basically 70% of the country are like, well, we already separate women and men's sports already. How am I a crazy person for thinking we should just keep it that way, even for trans people? Like the idea that those people are foaming at the mouth, you know, bigots who want to string trans people up. I just don't think that's an effective message. I think this,
no, it isn't.
You know, I think it just needs to be demonstrated again, more education.
They want to pass laws for children to have their genitals inspected.
Oh my God.
Like what kind of argument is this? Like, I don't think it's crazy. What do you mean you don't think it's crazy? They want to have someone check the genitals of children playing sports.
That someone would be a doctor. Okay. This is the other framing of this issue that is so dishonest. They're talking about legislation passed in places like Ohio. No, what they're saying is that if there is a suspicion that there is a male who is trying out for a team or a male competing on a team, that they want to be able to get a doctor's note affirming that that person was actually female. A doctor's note. It's not some weirdo perv pulling the pants down of all the kids who are going into the locker room. That is not accurate, and that is the way that this is being framed. Exactly, Stuart's mom. Exactly. And this is exactly what I was going to say. But the activists are asking for children to actually have genitals removed at will. Are we listening to this? Are we listening to this? And that's considered to be a rational position to take. No.
And in the cases of adults, guess what? There are adult leagues. And you want to know something else? The highest ranking sporting organizations in the world allow trans athletes to compete.
Right.
The Olympics allow trans people to compete.
And that's a problem.
Like, are you saying you know better than the Olympics?
Yes. Yes.
Additionally, like, I don't know how to say this, but like, again, I have to circle back around to the fact that like the civil rights, part of the struggle for civil rights has always incorporated sports and the normalization of people through sports. By participating in communal competition, that is one of the avenues trans people can be normalized in society.
Yes, and guess what? Do I even have to say it? The black athletes who competed on those teams, those desegregated teams, those male athletes, were competing against other men. Okay? I mean, can we agree on that? It was men competing against men.
And frankly, this is one of the reasons why conservatives obsess over keeping trans people out of sports.
It's not just conservatives.
And I don't know. Like, I feel like if you are someone who truly believes in like this equality notion, then you should do your research. And you should understand that the science that has been done on trans people in sports indicates that if they've been on HRT for 1 to 2 years, any kind of athletic advantage they may have had from like testosterone, if it's a trans girl, is gone.
No, it isn't.
The most recent study on like trans athletes,
isn't.
By the way, on trans women athletes, by the way, indicated that like lung function tends to be lower in trans girls than in cis girls.
What study is
like
that?
The idea that trans women and cis men are equivalent has been an idea in sports science for a while now, and the new study that just came out, a new study just came out that showed that is not correct. That is not a correct comparison at all. So again,
okay, if that was true, if all this was true, then the men competing in women's categories, in weightlifting, in boxing, or the DSD individuals like Caster Semenya, and indeed, I think it was in Rio, that the top 3 medalists, the 3 individuals who medaled in the women's track and field competition were all DSD, every single one of them. So if that were true, then you wouldn't see Leah Thomas beating an Olympic silver medalist in a competition. Leah Thomas, who had been a very mediocre swimmer when swimming as a man, all of a sudden was blowing out world records swimming in the women's competition. How is that possible? If all you have to do is go on HRT for a year. But then you can get into the pool with an Olympian and blow her out of the water. I don't know who's conducting these studies, and I don't know under what circumstances. I don't get it. I don't know who's paying for these studies. I don't know what the situation is, but all that we have to do, forget the studies and look at the results. Look at the results. We've seen it over and over and over again. And some of us inhabit the world of reality.
Again, arguing that this should be like, oh, well, we already segregated, why don't we keep segregating it? That's not a good argument here, because we're talking about fundamentally different groups of people that need that should maybe be playing in the groups that they identify with. I'm just throwing that out there. Yeah, it's like HRT causes body changes or something. It's really wild, right? As a trans person to talk about these issues, because I sit here, right? And I'm like, I have these big bazongas, right? I have big old titties. You know, I have like double D tits, all right?
And
I'm over here being like, you're trying to say that like I am biologically the same as a cis man. And I just want to say,
you are.
Like, I don't think that's true. Like, I don't know. Let me pull something up here, right? Let me pull something up real quick. Where is this?
So now we're saying that getting breast implants makes you a woman? I'm sorry, but that's not the case. Yeah. Look, I have been following the transformation of Adore Delano on Instagram. Adore Delano has gotten amazing work done. Absolutely amazing work done. Amazing facial feminization surgery, the breast implants, whatever other work Adore has gotten done, which has been truly remarkable to witness. I don't take anything away from that. Adore Delano is still male. You can get all the surgery you want. You can stay on estrogen for as long as you want. You are not going to become a woman. When I had my ovaries and my uterus removed, I did not become a man. It doesn't work that way. And this is the problem here. This is the problem. We cannot agree on what constitutes reality. And as long as we continue down this path as a society, we're not going to get anywhere. And the arguments are going to become more and more intractable. But getting breast implants and taking HRT does not make you a woman. You are male at the genetic chromosomal level. It's just a fact of life. I mean, it's almost like if you have to say these obvious things, that makes you a bigot. Well, I'll live with it, okay? I'll live with the turf label. I'll live with the bigot level accusation. I don't care, because these are facts. These are biological facts. And the fact that biology has been turned on its ear to benefit one group of people. And notice, again, it's not the female to male coalition that's making a fuss. They're not the problem. And I remember when I interviewed Buck Angel, I asked him if he thought that socialization played a part in it. And he said, absolutely. He said he was socialized as a woman. And that does make a difference. There's a tremendous amount of male entitlement here. A tremendous amount of it. And it's everywhere. It is so evident why there is one particular group in this whole trans activist community that is making all the problems, and why there is one group that is making relatively few problems.
Where did I put this? Let me take a look real quick. I thought I had it really handy, and I don't, and it makes me mad. Yeah, here we go. A lot of you have seen this before, right?
Okay, now what?
A lot of you have seen this before. Okay? This is me from a few years ago.
Yeah.
By a few years ago, I mean like 7 years ago, 6 years ago?
Good-looking man.
7 or 8 years ago. Okay? And, like, I can tell you, biologically, I am very different from where I was back then. Let me see if I can find an additional one here.
Oh, my God.
No, that's no good. Like, my face can't grow that hair anymore, right? My body doesn't make the same chemicals anymore. You know, like, I used to be furry all over, chat. Now I'm not. And that's not because I got any kind of like medical procedure. That's just a change that happens with HRT. Because you change biologically. You are different. I know there's another one on here somewhere. Whatever, I'll find it later, I'm sure. But essentially, the idea that, like, that guy who has, like, chest hair and is, 2 inches taller than me and, like, is much hardier than me in a lot of different ways, and I are, like, the same biologically, it's just not so.
Yes, it is so. It is so. On a chromosomal level, it is so. You may feel different. You may present differently. And, the estrogen probably had an impact on the way you think and the way you feel and all of that stuff. But biologically speaking, you are still male. I'm sorry to break it to you. You are still male. It's sad, really. It's sad. It's sad. It's frustrating. I don't know why I continue beating my head into a wall, but ultimately we have to have these conversations, even though the person we may be talking to or the person we're talking to may be unreasonable. We have to have these conversations.
And like, oh yeah, these tits, these double D tits that I didn't have several years ago, I didn't get surgery to get those. My body just made them because my body changed biologically.
Uh-huh.
So like I hope you guys get the point I'm trying to make here. That like his position is one also born out of ignorance here in a way that I find deeply irritating and disturbing for someone who is on such a large platform.
It's just a more willingness to like meet people where they are and not assume every single person you meet is going to have the views on trans issues as everybody from your freaking liberal arts college. Like it just doesn't work like that. And again,
yeah, also the idea that the only people who could possibly be on board with trans issues are like hoity-toity, like pink-haired activists from your local liberal arts college.
Well, it's getting there. In
reality, like the vast majority of trans people are working-class Americans who work with other working-class Americans who find people and groups of people within that environment to support them and love them. Like, again, the vast majority of people who are trans and who, again, really when they're saying trans activists, they just mean trans people. Because every single...
No. They mean trans activists. There's a huge distinction to be made. They mean trans activists. Because the vast majority of actual like gender dysphoria, transgender people, the ones who are not on YouTube, the ones who are not on TikTok, the ones who are not, presenting publicly like this, really do want to be left alone. And you do not represent their values. You don't represent what they want. These are people who have been very vocal in saying that they don't want children drugged and mutilated. They don't want to, get into the whole sports debate. They don't want to do that. They just want to live their lives. And these very radical positions that are being taken by people like this Jack individual are anathema to these individuals. They just want to be left in peace, to blend in and to be part of society with no special rights, no special distinctions, nothing like that. And they actually, the ones that I've spoken to, find people like you very, very cringe. And they see that people like you are rolling the movement back. And it's a problem. And these extreme positions are hurting the gay community as well, which is not appreciated. Let's continue.
A trans person becomes an activist when they need to, out of necessity.
I say this up here all the time. If you think that 70%, like you're on the other side of a 70+% issue, if your answer to that is like that 70% of the population are complete crazy scumbag idiots who I need to berate at every turn, you're just going about this all wrong.
I agree.
I'm sorry, I'm unaware of these trans activist groups that as a matter of policy are going out there and harassing just random strangers.
Are you serious? You're unaware of that. You're unaware. Oh, but the language was very specific. These groups that are going out. So does a group of individuals, very angry individuals, behaving this way, does that ring a bell or no? Okay. Could we please not be obtuse? Would it be too much to ask that we actually acknowledge reality?
No one's doing that.
What? No one?
Now,
are you sure?
Are individual trans people being salty at other people online? Yeah. Welcome to the
online.
Internet. Everyone is doing that all the time.
No, in real life.
Also, one of the ways you win over people who haven't made up their minds on trans issues or on any issue is to agitate, be irritating, and like get the message out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
like, there are issues in the past that were correct morally, ethically correct, but weren't supported by the majority of the population. Okay? There are so many examples of issues like that. And, like, you should still advocate for the correct position, even if it means you have to be irritating. Even if it means you have to say something unpopular and stand up in your group of friends and say, hey, that's not right. It asks for courage for people to stand up and rise to the moment. So when he's like, what do you mean you berate people? Well, you know, sometimes an act of courage might include, you know, some hard truths. Sometimes standing up to a bigot might require you to say some hard truths.
Okay.
Sometimes advocating for a marginalized group's humanity and worthiness might require courage.
Or, you know, just using brute force and threatening people and getting people fired and getting people arrested. Women, predominantly. Women have been targeted by these people. Getting people shunned, getting people, threatening people's families, the death threats, threats of violence, rape threats. Does this all sound reasonable? Yeah. For example,
I don't know. Do these people have the courage for that? I'm not convinced, and that's deeply sad, especially for people who represent one of the largest progressive online news networks.
I will never tire of saying that.
Yeah, and look, let's remember how the gay community won over the hearts and minds of Americans. It took a tremendous amount of patience
and a lot of time.
You know, like almost like a public education campaign. So people could actually familiarize themselves with gay people in this country. But more importantly, you know, they made an effort to like make clear, like, we're not a threat. We're just like everyone else.
Right. Yeah.
I know I've mentioned this multiple times, but my partner went to gay prom in high school, and activists showed up there. Not, of course, trans activists who, as we all know, have bad tactics, I guess, according to this video. But you know, evangelical Christian activists.
Okay.
And they showed up to her gay prom with buckets full of rocks so that they could stone the children attending gay prom.
Okay.
That was in my lifetime. Okay? It didn't just take, like, being seen as acceptable. It took courage, and it took the courage not just to put your body on the line, but also to, like, stand up and assert yourself, even though you knew it was going to be an unpopular thing to do. Even though you knew, you know, it could result in you getting, like, beat up and lynched on the side of the road. That happened. Gay people would sometimes just disappear, and you didn't know whether or not they died from AIDS, or whether they had been disowned by their family, or what happened to them. You would just never see them again.
Yeah, I remember that time. And just FYI, I had to deal with a phalanx of evangelical Christian wackos when I was going through a period where I was freelancing and I didn't have health insurance because I couldn't afford it. And I had to go get pap smears and pelvic exams at Planned Parenthood. And I had to walk through that phalanx of psychos. And going into Planned Parenthood, I had to go through a metal detector. And when I finally got a chance to see the doctor, I said, you know, the only thing that has surprised me about this, because I had always gone to private doctors. I had never gone to a clinic before. I said, the only thing that surprises me about this horrible experience is that you're not wearing a bulletproof vest. And the doctor said, how do you know I'm not wearing one? Believe me, some of us understand those risks. Some of us have had to deal with that shit. All right? Just to get a medical exam, just to get a renewal of the birth control pill because we had menstrual irregularities, or because we were there to see what we could do to protect ourselves from unwanted pregnancies, or, you know, girls getting an IUD inserted, or whatever, or Norplant, or whatever the case is. And I can tell you that when I was in that waiting room, the majority of the girls who were in there were quite young, poor, and minorities. And they had to deal with that shit. And trust me, I was around during the HIV/AIDS crisis. I remember that like it was yesterday. And I know that there were a lot of activists at the time who were furious at the slowness of the FDA in approving drugs for AIDS. You know, bicycle chaining themselves to fences and getting more and more militant. And groups like ACT UP decided that they were going to start outing members of Congress or gay Republicans. And that went over like the proverbial lead fucking balloon. It accomplished absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, there was a push to make these drugs more readily available, but a lot of these drugs were toxic and they didn't work. You know, and it took a lot of time to develop the cocktail that allowed people like my friend Frank to live with HIV for upwards of 40 years now. So it's true that sometimes you do have to lay your body on the line. Sometimes you do have to take physical risks. But ultimately, what won out was a normalization, an acceptance of gay people as being just like everybody else, and two exceptional lawyers, Ted Olson and David Boies, who argued in favor of gay marriage in front of the Supreme Court using the Loving versus Virginia case as a precedent, and it was superb. So it was a multi-pronged approach, but this militant, vicious, in-your-face, constant haranguing and trying to destroy people's lives in order to gain an advantage, no. This is not going to work. I'm just telling you right now.
And that was in my lifetime. I'm not that old. I may be old, but I'm not that old. And it was not about being acceptable. Because, frankly, being gay in America is still seen by the vast majority, by a lot of Americans. I'm not going to say the vast majority, but like a lot of Americans see being gay as deviant. You know, and you can be a conventionally attractive man with another conventionally attractive man, and you want to know what happens? There are still like an ungodly number of people in this country who will tell you to your face that they don't think you should be able to have children. Mm-hmm. There are still enough people in this country that believe gay people don't deserve like marriage rights. And they're still advocating for it on a national party level.
Who?
And so when we're talking about this, the palatability of gay people,
you know, the most vehement, and they don't couch it this way. They don't present it as we don't think that gay couples should have children. They don't verbalize it that way. It's the anti-surrogacy extremists who have really targeted gay male couples. But as a policy, I'm sorry, am I missing something? Did I fall asleep and wake up in a country where this is like, where we're back in 1985? I don't think so. And I live in a very, very conservative part of the country. This is Trump country. There are a lot of evangelical Christians here. And I have yet to run into a single person in my environs, in my vicinity, who is so invested that they're going out there and protesting and saying, oh, you know, these gay people. It's not the 1980s anymore. This part of the country, the part of the country I'm in, a very conservative rural part of the country, is actually very live and let live. Very live and let live. Very, very tolerant. I'm not seeing it that way. I don't, maybe I'm blind. Maybe I'm biased. I don't know. But I'm very sensitive to shit like that, and I have yet to see it. But let's continue.
Was not the thing that ultimately won gay people rights. It's just not. What won gay people rights was the literal blood, sweat, tears, and lives given for that cause.
Again, I'm going to repeat, it was not ACT UP that won hearts and minds. It wasn't ACT UP. I was there. I saw it. Nope. This is what I've been saying, Lava. I've been saying this for the past almost 3 years. That the problem with a lot of people like this, and I don't know where this Jack person lives, I have no idea. But the problem is that people are so siloed and so convinced that the way that they think and the way that they live is the way that everybody else thinks and lives. It's simply not true. And there's no effort to travel to parts of the country that they're unfamiliar with and that they may fear, and sit down and talk to people who may disagree with them, but don't wish them harm. Or they may find that if they travel to parts of the country that they're unfamiliar with a lot of Trump signs and a lot of Trump billboards and stuff, they may find out that they can go places like that and nobody will care. They would be shocked to find out how many people don't care. People care very deeply about children being medicated and mutilated. People care very, very deeply about that. People don't like the whole sports thing because they consider it to be cheating and they don't want their daughters getting injured. They care about weirdos infiltrating women's spaces and possibly harming them. They care about that. Yes, they do. But in the big picture, no. They'd be very shocked, actually, at the great yawn of indifference that they would encounter. Anyway, you guys, I'm going to pull the plug on this stream now because I've been going for over 2 hours and I'm a little bit crabby. Not because of what was said, even though that's not exactly uplifting content, but because I'm tired and I'm hungry and I want to have some dinner. All right. So anyway, I want to thank you guys for being here today. This was great. And if you wouldn't mind dropping a like on your way out or subscribing if you're not subscribed already, that would be great. I appreciate it. And thanks again. And it's good to see some familiar faces in chat, some people coming back. That's cool. And I will see you guys the next time. Thanks, everybody.